Well, after months of uncertainty, Britain's Prime Minister is now making it very clear this is going to be a hard Brexit. That means as Britain leaves the EU, it won't try to hang on to its membership of the single market, preferring instead to be able to control immigration from the EU. Is Britain regaining its sovereignty or committing financial suicide, as some suggest? In a moment, we'll be talking to analysts on both sides of the Brexit debate. But first, the highlights from May's speech.
Theresa May's Brexit speech was always going to be a tightrope walk. Ever since the UK voted in June to leave the EU, businesses and investors had wanted clarity as to the government's terms for its divorce. She had said formal exit talks would start by the end of March. But May was keen not to show too much of her hand in the tough negotiations ahead.
We are about to enter a negotiation. That means there will be give and take. There will have to be compromises. It will require imagination on both sides. And not everybody will be able to know everything at every stage. But I recognise how important it is to provide business, the public sector, and everybody with as much certainty as possible as we move through the process.
The pound had been under pressure ever since the referendum over worries that Brexit would leave the British economy weaker. But her statement that Parliament would get to vote on the final deal sent the pound sharply higher against the US dollar.
I can confirm today that the government will put the final deal that is agreed between the UK and the EU to a vote in both Houses of Parliament before it comes into force.
But the most anticipated issue was trade and how it would be carried out with European countries after Brexit. Being a member of the EU single market has given businesses on both sides of the English Channel tariff-free access to one another's customers for 4 decades. But it's also meant making significant contributions to EU budgets and accepting rules made in Brussels. May spelled out her vision of the UK's trade relationship with the EU.
So we do not seek membership of the single market. Instead, we seek the greatest possible access to it through a new, comprehensive, bold and ambitious free trade agreement. And because we will no longer be members of the single market, we will not be required to contribute huge sums to the EU budget.
A key argument of those who campaigned for the UK to leave has always been that doing so would allow it to negotiate trade deals with other countries, including the US and China. May said she was optimistic of being able to do so.
We want to get out into the wider world, to trade and do business all around the globe. Countries including China, Brazil and the Gulf states have already expressed their interest in striking trade deals with us. We've started discussions on future trade ties with countries like Australia, New Zealand and India. And President-elect Trump has said Britain is not at the back of the queue for a trade deal with the United States, the world's biggest economy, but front of the line.
May's speech answered some of the key uncertainties surrounding Brexit, but it's also raised many others that could take years to resolve. Azhar Sukri, TRT World.
Well, joining me now from London is the economist Vicky Price and Robert Olds, the director of the Bruges Group think tank. Robert Olds, if we could start with you. Thank you for joining us on Money Talks once again. It's been a point made by a number of commentators that it would be financial and economic suicide to leave a club of 500 million customers to retreat to just your own size, about 65 million. Isn't that a fact?
Well, in the European Union, there's actually a lot less people who have economic power within the EU because the EU is in such economic crisis with unemployment, banking crisis in Italy and also in Germany with organisations like Deutsche Bank, is that the ability of the European Union as a market is declining all the time and the rest of the world is growing in importance. Now Britain has a global vision. We want to keep trading with the European Union. Of course we will. We have a deficit in terms of our trade, a trade deficit with other states within the EU. Even in services with Germany, they will want to keep trade links open with the UK, just as we want to keep trade with the European Union open. We want to explore other opportunities. We want to have trade agreements with China, with America. I myself have been contacted by Australia to take part in a review that they're doing regarding trade with Britain. The world is opening up, it's growing, and that's where our future lies. Britain never was a country that was hemmed into. We always have wider horizons, and this is what Britain's returning to.
Okay,
We're returning to a global vision.
Vicky Price, do you think that Britain can secure a free trade agreement with the European Union that'll be of as equal benefit as being in the single market?
No. We have the great advantage now of having this tariff-free market that we can sell our goods and services with very low transaction costs, where there is agreement in terms of the regulations that are applicable to everything we do, and where, of course, there are standards that make it easier for any company from here to export anywhere in the EU. And, of course, you also have no non-tariff barriers. In other words, things that may be preventing a financial service from being sold to other countries in the EU. So it's something that banks here in the UK have enjoyed, and lots of other banks that have come and set up here have enjoyed, being able to have a single passport that allows them to sell all across Europe. And that will be a real loss if indeed we leave. And there is no doubt that most firms, trade organizations, everyone, yes, they wanted certainty, but they didn't really want to leave the single market. They understood we were leaving the EU, but the single market was something that everybody thought was actually beneficial to the UK economy.
Robert Olds, it's a fact, isn't it, that European politicians are very angry about Britain leaving the European Union, and they're not going to make Britain's life easy in the negotiations. Why would they give a free trade deal that roughly substitutes for membership of the single market?
Well, Michel Barnier, former Commissioner for the Internal Market and Financial Services, who's now representing the Commission in the future Article 50 negotiations, said he actually wants a deal with the UK, and that deal can be achieved within 18 months. He's actually said that there should be links open with the city, that we can keep the financial services based primarily within the City of London in the UK, trading in services to the markets in the European Union. And that's the actual representative of the European Commission. They see that it makes economic sense. And the European Union is in such dire economic straits, they dare not say to German car exporters or producers in France and other, we're so interlinked, they dare not say that actually we're not going to have trade links to try and damage the UK politically, because the European Union just can't afford to have restrictions against the UK.
Right.
We are closely linked in terms of trade, and we will continue to be able to trade, because increasingly a lot of the decisions are being made globally, and the standards that are being set that enable trade.
I'm afraid we've lost the signal with Robert Olds, but Vicky Price, if I could just come back to you for a moment. We know that there's also a second issue in addition to the single market, and that is the customs union. That wasn't made as clear today by Theresa May, but the customs union is very important, isn't it? Because it allows the bloc to set tariffs it's a huge bloc. So in dealing with China, it is perhaps gives the European Union considerable weight. Will Britain be able to exert the same influence on the world stage and become this big global trading partner as it expects?
Turkey is
Vicky
The
Price.
answer is no. But first of all, yes. First of all, in terms of what we just heard, I mean, Michel Barnier did not actually, they denied already to have said something, the positive stuff that was reported in the UK's press about what he said in relation to the financial sector still carrying on operating just as it did before. So this is just not true, what we just heard before. The second thing is that Europe, of course, in itself is growing, so it's not a failing economy. It has its issues, it has its problems with migration, but actually it's doing rather well, and it's likely to be growing by between 1.5% and 2% next year, more or less the same as the UK. But I think in terms of the customs union, the benefits that we get, at present, the way that it works is that if you are a member of the customs union, you have a common external tariff, so that anything that comes in from abroad has to pay a certain charge, or rather whoever is importing it has to pay a certain charge, so it makes it more expensive, so it protects up to a point the European economy. What Theresa May did not make very clear when she spoke about the customs union, she said, of course, we're going to leave the single market, but actually we want to be part, possibly, of the customs union in some sectors. That was actually a very, very confusing statement. And she did talk as if particular sectors might get a benefit of the single market and tariff-free access.
Vicky Price, thank you very much for your analysis.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we've run out of time. Robert Olds, we would give you the right of reply, but unfortunately your audio signal has broken up. But thank you both for joining us on the programme as ever.